first step of a multi-year endeavor that Audacity has put together to create scalable, sustainable, and flourishing communities called permacolonies. And it is our hope that, with time, if it's done right, this will contribute to a lasting blueprint that will inform how future humanity-centric cities or settlements will look like, whether it's on Earth, on Mars, or any habitable planets. Right. So I think without further ado, let's get started on what really inspired us to come up with the Permacolony Challenge in the first place. So unless you have been living under a rock, I think all of you would have been well aware by now how the world has been negatively impacted by COVID-19. But this crisis has also taught us a couple of important lessons, right? It has exposed multiple cracks in our system, especially in the most fundamental areas such as food. We see how, we are so over-reliant on centralized systems, and sometimes systems are too interconnected at the expense of local and regional systems that can actually provide sufficient buffering capacity to absorb supply shocks. Another area is inadequate nourishment that we see across the world's population, and this refers to both bodily nourishment as well as mental nourishment. Right? Today's food system prioritizes a lot of cheap calories, and although it's affordable for most people, I think these are the same calories that promote diseases like obesity, heart disease, etc. And people with these conditions have a higher chance of actually contracting COVID, right? With lockdowns becoming more frequent as well, I think there's this increased isolation and disconnectedness from social settings and whatnot. So I think this has also taken a toll on a lot of people's mental states. COVID has also shown us that we are perhaps not focusing enough on inequality. I think this problem is becoming worse by the day. And although it's the same virus that we're talking about, it affects different groups of people disproportionately, as we have seen. And in particular, the hardest hits are the ones that are poor and vulnerable. And at the same time, we're operating against the backdrop of climate change, right, which is one of the biggest global challenges in our lifetime. With rising sea levels, volatile temperatures, this has actually triggered history's largest wave of human migration and prompting a lot of new cities to be created worldwide, even outside of Earth. So I think it's now apparent that the old or current systems that we have been operating under are broken, flawed, and might no longer be relevant for the new normal that we're experiencing right now. I think one heartening thing that we have seen is that concepts that usually take pretty long to get buy-in from governments or from corporates are now being fast-forwarded. So some of these concepts are what we talked about in yesterday's session under Audacity, where we mentioned concepts like decentralization, autonomy, empowerment, sustainability, etc. I think these concepts are so important and they are key to a radical transformation. So with these new opportunities, I think the question is really, how can we design more sustainable human settlements in the future? And for startups here, what is your moonshot? And we hope to address this via the Moonshot Permacolony Challenge with a very simple but ambitious vision, which is to create scalable, ground-up communities called permacolonies that are fully self-sustainable in food, energy, water, and production, while supporting mental health and also well-being. So I'm proud to say that the first permacolony, which aims to achieve this vision by 2025, is going to be located at the Audacity Innovators Playground within Jurong Innovation District in Singapore. So that's the first kind of physical site. Of course, we have plans to provide a virtual space for startups and innovators to be involved as well. I think one common question that's been surfaced is, what do we exactly mean by moonshot, right? And by definition, if you look it up on the dictionary, it refers to ambitious, exploratory, and groundbreaking projects that are undertaken without any expectation of near-term profitability. So what this translates to us is that we're really looking out for solutions in blue oceans. They are not just incremental, but they have a 10 times or more kind of positive impact on our society. And hopefully, some of these solutions can be incorporated into future city designs across the world 10 to 20 years from today. Another related question that we get quite often is, since we have such an ambitious vision, how is it possible that we're going to achieve this in 5 years? So totally get what you guys are trying to say, but I think this vision of 100% self-sustainability by 2025 for permacolony is actually not a hard target per se, but we rather we set it in a way that challenges all of us to work on moonshot solutions starting from today, right? I think it is true that some of these technologies might take years before they commercialize, but we believe that these investments are worthwhile because ultimately these will be breakthroughs that are instrumental for a better future. So Permacolony, our first physical site in Singapore at Jurong Innovation District, will be Asia's first tech-enabled, self-sustaining, flourishing, and autonomous community. And as I mentioned, this will be housed in our Audacity Innovators Playground, where we hope to bring together a community of global innovators, probably approximately about 100 of them, both physically as well as virtually. And needless to say, by being part of this bootcamp, all of these startups will already be part of this community of global innovators that we hope to work with to make Permacolony a reality. For this particular project, it will also coexist in a natural environment. So our site is actually right next to a 5-hectare eco garden in Singapore, and the challenge is to be 100% self-sustainable by 2025. So as we're in search of this better future through Permacolony, we need to move ahead with certain shared ideals that we hold, right? So I think this is nicely summarized in the acronym SEARCH, which stands for Systems, Environment, Agency, Resilience, Culture, as well as Humanity. And as we mentioned briefly during yesterday's session on Audacity, I think for the creation of any kind of self-sustainable community, right, that has to take on a holistic approach that involves cross-pollination between different teams, right? And this means that we need to kind of examine the dynamics and the synergies between different systems. So look at how food system interfaces with co-living spaces in a community, or even like how we use energy and resources. We also look at empowering the community that lives within Permacolony to be empowered through making their own creations, and to be empowered by robotics and automation. And of course, at the heart of it all, to promote human well-being as well as flourishing. So we know also that with this ambitious vision, startups and innovators can't do it alone. So they'll be supported by a diverse network of Audacity's partners that spans from mentors and advisors to enablers and investors, to our corporate partners, our lead demand drivers, as well as regulatory partners, so on and so forth. So the network is here for you to tap on. And I would say that one of the main or key value propositions of Permacolony to startups is really the fact that, use this Permacolony playground to develop use cases that will help you to grow, right? This is where you're able to test bid under a whole systems approach, in an integrated manner and not so much in silos, right? It's not just testing in the food system alone, not just testing in the energy system alone, but by adopting this kind of whole systems approach, ideas and concepts that are usually difficult to convince investors with, it might be more easily shown through this particular use case, so that people can understand your solution in a particular context. And through this, you are able to get funded or find your first customers. So we welcome local and global startups, and not just startups, but also individual innovators. So if you're aware of other individual innovators or startups who would fit into this particular vision, do let us know as well. And to sum up, I mean, this is really an opportunity to make a real impact by building products and technologies that last. And you can tap on our support network of partners and mentors, as well as our resources, physical and virtual, at Jurong Innovation District. Okay, so right now we have a very special segment. So we'll go in depth into the 6 visions that we have for Permacolony, and we'll kind of introduce these themes and why we think they are important, right? I'll also bring on some of my close friends and community leads in Audacity who are working on each of these areas. So we will start off with the bottom of the pyramid of Maslow's hierarchy, which is food. All right, so for Permacolony, we've envisioned a food-secure community that is resilient, autonomous, and harmonious. So now I'll invite Jaden, my fellow co-lead for a project where we are looking into the future of food and agriculture, to join me to decipher this vision. Right. Hi, Jaden.
Hi, Young-eun. Hi, all. Thanks for joining us today. I think for us to really look at why an autonomous and harmonious food system is important, we have to look at how our current system is not working. Our current system runs on specialization, where we rely on large production in order to achieve efficiency in terms of output. But we see the breakdown of the system in terms of the destruction of our environment and also the evident vulnerability to the food system when the supply chain gets disrupted. One of these really good example is, right here in Singapore, where we rank so high on the global food security due to our extensive planning, but yet COVID has shed a light on how vulnerable our food system can be, due to our high reliance on foreign imports. So in order for us to continue thriving on this world, I think we need to reevaluate the way that we are producing food to reduce the strain on our planet, one that's more regenerative rather than extractive. Yeah, so one way we thought of is to really use polyculture instead of monoculture of crops, so that one, we can nourish ourselves with a full spectrum of like nutrition, nutritious food, and also two, it also helps us maintain the quality of the soil, so that we can adopt a more environmentally sustainable way of farming that has greater longevity than what we're doing right now. Yeah, so when we look at sustainability, it's such a big word. So how can we actually evaluate it? So I think a sustainable food system is one that is autonomous, one that the community can be self-sufficient in order to have freedom and access to food without relying on centralized food system. And we can see so much benefits to having an autonomous food system. The community can be self-sufficient with fresh produce without the loss of nutrients. That's one. And then another is that carbon emissions can be reduced drastically with a shorter supply chain. So there's also the flexibility and the ability to plow back resources back into the system to achieve this closed loop system, so that we can continue to flourish in the years to come. Yeah, so another thing when we look at sustainability is also is the food system harmonious? Because I think with only a portion of the world population thriving, that's also not the way to live, right? We see that we can actually produce so much more food than what the population requires, but yet we have so many food deserts around. So what we really hope to build is an inclusive and equitable food production that is accessible by all. Yeah, so that more people can have access to healthy and affordable food, regardless of income and also geography, proximity. And I think it's very important that we leverage on technology to empower more people in different communities to gain this access. Yeah.
Great, Jaden. So I think what we really have set out is kind of like a holistic vision, right? That spans across the entire value chain. If there is one super urgent and pressing problem that we were to solve today in a food system, what do you think it is? And why?
I think that there is really so much, right? Like one is like the quality of our soil. We have like 60 years of farmable land left. But another pressing issue that I see is the amount of food waste that we are producing, right? As mentioned, there's more food produced than what we need. So if we can efficiently use this food waste to turn them into useful products, like maybe another food product or turning that into fertilizer, then I think then we can evenly distribute these resources and maximize the use properly. So I'm really quite stoked to see that, we have quite a few startups amongst us that is addressing this food waste issue. Yeah, so looking forward to hear the features as well. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed we do. I think we have like Mitero, IFT, and also Eco STP that's looking at waste management. So I think we'll be really excited to work with them. Right.
Cool.
Great. Thank you, Jaden. Okay, so next we'll move on to the topic of shelter, right, which is another key physiological need that we need to fulfill. So let's have Shui on board for this. Shui actually oversees multiple experiments for alternative modes of living that's enabled by communal sensibilities and technologies. So can I have Shui to join me now?
Hi, Young-eun.
Hi, Shui.
Great presentation. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah. So I think Shui, this particular vision focuses on how the community will not just coexist with one another, right? But it's also talking about coexisting with the environment and with nature. So what does this symbiotic coexistence really mean? Or like, can you break it down for us?
Yeah, I think in the previous segment when Sushi was bringing in like the ideas of Audacity, moving away from efficiency-driven and optimization-driven paradigm to a humanity-centric, and the emphasis on humanity-centric as us in conjunction with the other like species and nature around us, right? I think that's something that we are really looking into, because like shelter and living and homes cannot be understood in isolation from the rest of the world. Yes, the traditional idea is that we build shelters to protect us from the wild, but the reality is that we have actually extracted so much from the world as we know it, and it's not sustainable, and also it has alienated us from communities and other things that are around us, you know. So moving from the human-centric driven design to a humanity-centric driven design, which is actually looking into living symbiotically with nature in its larger form, not just nature in the form of like green, but also animals, plants, different like the large like pool of biodiversity. Yeah, I think that's firstly so important. Yeah. Secondly, I think that we use our homes to, you know, shape our lives, and it gives us meaning. So creating spaces that are user-centric and also resource efficient, such that we can break away from an extractive nature, extractive relationship with nature. Yeah, but like we should regenerate and like respect it. Yeah, that way. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So talking about some of these design principles, right? I know you've been busy in the recent months overseeing the land preparation for our physical site of Permacolony, right? So maybe you can share with us some of the lessons or some of the considerations that were taken as part of that process.
Yeah. So you know, as mentioned, Jurong Innovation District is the largest living lab of Singapore, as well as I think, I'm not wrong, it's the largest greenfield site. So being a greenfield site, it means that it's largely untouched. So we actually adopted this really beautiful green piece of land, yeah, which had a lot of shrubs and trees. And this is the land that we would like to spruce up to do deployment for Permacolony. So originally our idea was, okay, let's respect nature, let's not cut down anything, let's like, you know, keep it in its pristine state. But then we realized, you know, where is that drawback? Because let's say we need flat land for deployment, and do we want to, you know, create these kind of hurdles that our innovators will have to jump through? And also then what's the question with the quality of the trees that are on site? So the solution that we had was to cut down the trees, but use the timber like efficiently in our farming systems, or to create fencing and to, you know, give back to the land, as well as to regenerate it so that it's healthier than before. And then when we regenerate it through different farming methods, we can also flatten it out, yeah, and deploy technologies on it. And all at once, like we also don't want to create like we actually want to like welcome the birds and bees and stuff to come in. So we are avoiding using things like solar systems that will create high frequency pitches to send them out. Because, well, these technologies, again, right, back to the human-centric, where we think that, okay, we can do this without any repercussions to us, when we actually damage like the biodiversity around us, it greatly affects the quality of our flora and fauna and our ability to thrive in it. Yeah, so I think striking that middle ground has been so important for us. Like, how do we optimize it, but yet still be respectful to what has been given to us?
Definitely. And I think for those of you who don't know much about Jurong Innovation District, or even the garden that is behind us, we've actually seen a lot of interesting creatures in our backyard. So it ranges from monkeys to wild boars to, I don't know, chameleons. Yeah, we have a lot of wildlife. And it's also a place for bird watchers to visit. So we have a very interesting playground that we have for innovators to test it. And I think we are looking forward to welcoming all of you guys to our physical site as well. So thanks, Sherry.
Thanks, Yangan.
Okay, now let's move on to systems, right? Because we talked about food, we talked about infrastructure, but I think it's also crucial to kind of look at the systems within the infrastructure itself. So can I invite Ritika to join me for this?
Thanks, Yangan. I'm here. Hello, everyone.
Yeah, hi, Ritika. Yeah, so Ritika, I know you work closely with students under Project Share, right, to design next generation civilization kits that are both modular as well as self-sufficient. right? So in this vision we have for communities is really to push them towards being generative rather than extractive, right? So why is that important?
Okay, so the mindset that we started out with was currently when we build anything, we are disrupting a natural ecosystem. So when we're doing something, let's do it for good. So what we're doing exactly with Permacolony is a conscious direction towards moving, towards innovating, creating, and utilizing alternative resources to minimize human impact itself. Coming to the type of thinking that we do, it is a systems thinking where we understand the consumption of all the users of that space and the interrelationship of resources such as energy, water, waste loops, which is pivotal to creating and understanding what sustainable communities are.
Cool. Are there any current solutions that you see today that have kind of like, have inspired you, have caught your attention, and it's really relevant to this vision?
Okay, so just as a background, we are scouting for modular, flexible systems. So can we stack it up as and when we require it? So solar, as we all know, is inconsistent in terms of the number of hours of production that we get with weather changes and clouds. So what we really need is a good battery storage system. So we're now in the process of scouting as well for an interesting system where it's a stackable battery with an inbuilt thermal management system. So what this does is it resolves the normal overheating issues or the size of the battery. Like for example, if the size of the house of the door is too small, then your battery won't even fit in. So it's these challenges that we're always looking at. And the other thing is sometimes there isn't the dearth of ideas or solutions, but it's the implementation, deployment, and the testing of the solution that's also very important.
I see. Yeah. Yeah, I think for a place like sunny Singapore, of course, the most abundance of renewable energy we have is solar, right? But yet we can't just rely on solar solutions alone. And I guess it's that combination of different energy solutions that includes like maybe solar or even like maybe
waste to energy,
geothermal, right? Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so looking forward, and hopefully we see more energy startups coming forward. Thanks, Ritika.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is our vision for permacolony communities to be empowered through the DIY culture to create the items that they need and are useful to society. So Shane, can you hop on? So Shane, he oversees our next generation maker studio at Audacity, which is really cool if you haven't taken a look at it. So Shane, I can't see you.
I'm here.
Okay, you're here. Okay, there you are. Yeah, I love that Microfactory logo every time I look at it. Okay, great. So Shane, first and foremost, I think maybe you can share with us a little bit more about why the DIY culture is so important.
Yeah, sure. I guess when we talk about DIY culture, we really think of it as this link between the intention and the execution. So it's almost like if we're able to make people realize that they can take their whatever thoughts they have floating around in their head, like, how do I take this idea and turn it into a reality? That process is something that's extraordinarily powerful. And as people are able to nurture and grow this power of like intentional creation, there comes this second order effect, which is kind of this development of agency. And so people really become, and it's unfortunate a lot of people don't get to have an opportunity to develop this and adopt this as part of their culture. And what happens is they're kind of left looking outward for solving their problems. And so, with the microfactory and things like Vivita, which we heard about yesterday, it's a great place that provides an opportunity for kind of this generation of this intention to execution. So it's really kind of like shifting a mental model, saying I did this thing and so therefore I can do it. So it's like a very active participatory, it's a very participatory type of thing. And
right.
Actually it's the round table that you had yesterday, and you had like a word cluster with all of the different values that kind of represent what permacolony is. and kind of right in the middle, the biggest word you had there with the biggest fonts. I don't think it was done by mistake, but if it was, it doesn't matter. I'm still running with this. Is that if you can think of a person as a unit of potential energy. So everybody has a potential to become something incredible. You know, I mean, look at the amazing impacts that Taizo has had, or Elon Musk, or Bill Gates, people like this. All of them started as people. And if you're able to kind of represent what it would look like if all of these people were able to kind of develop this sense of agency and develop this human autonomy, you know, we could really be a transformative force to solve the challenges that we're seeing at a global scale. So I guess that's kind of where the DIY culture is, kind of this growth and sense of agency and, you know, potential for positive force.
Yeah. I mean, what would you say to cynics who feel that, you know, humans are inherently lazy, and we always choose the path of least resistance, right? So we always go for things that are most convenient, or you just buy things off the shelf. So what would you say to people like that, like to change their mindset?
Yeah, you know, sometimes lazy is good, I guess. I mean, there's a quote that's, you know, if necessity is the mother of innovation, laziness is the father. So I guess, you know, a lot of times we want to choose the path of least resistance, and we want to conserve energy. And I guess, you know, humans are kind of the, you know, top of the food chain, I guess. I mean, we have the greatest intelligence and capacity to change the world in which we live. And so, yeah, I guess people just naturally, lazily, or trying out of necessity think, you know, there must be a better way. So yeah, I would say, yeah, go ahead and be lazy. Try and find an innovative and creative way to kind of do less of what you don't like, you know, just, yeah, go for it. Be lazy, but that doesn't mean you can't be active or can't be doing things on your own.
Right. And I think talking about being innovative, I like one of the quotes that you mentioned before, which is to make with waste is to make without waste. So I find that quote really interesting. And you know, how does this whole topic of waste fit into the vision?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like talking about circularity and ecosystems and sustainability and all these types of things. But fundamentally, if we take a look at waste, what we're talking about really is something that we say is no longer useful or needed or desired after we've finished doing whatever it is. So Jaden was talking about all this incredible amount of food waste. But, you know, it's like once we start zooming out a little bit, we can start seeing that this waste is just part of something in a much larger system. So if we like apply a systems thinking model to it, maybe when we circle back on things like sustainability, you know, sustainability is a word that is in common use, but a lot of times it's used without a precision and what it's representing. So when we try to use this word in our community, we try to look at the intersection of resilience, autonomy, and harmony, some of the stuff that Slice was talking about. And so if we start looking at this and we start looking at the energy and materials that are used, and then above that, like the species and ecosystems that are affected, and then society, maybe the economy and culture, and beyond that, like the individual, where they sit, what's their health and happiness, then we can see that this concept of waste is simply just exist. It's something that exists in the system. And if we can take this waste or trash and we can turn it into something valuable, then it just becomes another resource. And so we want to think about kind of the lifetime value of how things move around these complex systems, so that they aren't kind of single-use plastics where we're using virgin materials and basically transporting the landfills, right? That's kind of an unoptimized process. So Yeah, I guess that's what we kind of try to represent when we talk about to make with waste is to make without waste. Yeah, just fun little sayings that we have.
Okay. Fantastic quote, man, Shane. It never gets old. It's gold. Okay, cool. Thanks a lot, Shane. So now that we've talked about freeing up resources by upcycling waste in production, let's move on to freeing up our time, right? By using technology, robotics, and automation. So oops. Okay, so can I invite Xuan to join me for this? Xuan is someone who loves to build robots, and she's leading a project that looks at gamification to remove landmines remotely in developing countries. So Xuan, come and join me.
Hi, Anand.
Hello. Cool. Yeah. So Xuan, I think my first question to you is, with this great potential of using robots and automation to make our lives better, right? How can we improve the accessibility of robotics to the masses or to the public in general?
I think the concept of technology facilitated work is not new, like has been around for very, very long. But then given like current trends, we see like robotics and automation serving very specialized industries, especially those very high value output industries where like companies or governments are able to afford the high capital costs required. But because of like the intention which we use to adopt technology and also like the cost, it creates kind of a very centralized and capitalistic system, which prevents robotics or technology from serving like a greater purpose or like serving humanity better than it is currently serving us now. So I think there are several like dangerous, dirty and difficult industries or tasks where the traditional model which we use for robotics now really does not help those people. So for instance, at Audacity, our work now we're like looking at involving the deployment of robotics with gamification to revolutionize how mine clearance can be done. So demining is very highly dangerous and difficult, but also it is really very heavily reliant on human deminers. So there's very little machines, robots, or any form of technology that is being used to help this group or this community of people. Yeah. So there isn't. So I think the huge budgets or like even the adoption of technology itself, it leaves behind people at which we at Audacity here, we're trying to look at an alternative model to empower more communities to leverage on technology to create like a greater working environment for all. So like one that is more inclusive and is safe and is enjoyable for everybody. Yeah.
Right. So I think there are a lot of benefits for using robotics, and I think that's quite clear. But on the flip side, there are also people who are worried that, with automation, there'll be human displacement, right, of many workers across the board. And ultimately, maybe even the demise of the human race, as we have witnessed in some dystopian films. So what do you have to say about that? Or like, how do you think humans and machines can work together more meaningfully?
I think the intention when we adopt or like deploy technology or robotics or like even artificial intelligence is very important, because right now what really drives this adoption of technology is very capitalistic in nature. It's driven by increasing the productivity at workplaces or like cutting the cost of labor. So it is the adoption of these technology was meant to displace labor, which brings about this dilemma. So I think for us, we really want to look at a way to redefine work. So like work would be different from what we really understand it to be now, where someone is assigned to accomplish a task in exchange for money needed for a livelihood. So with this alternative model where we can engage both technology and humans to work together and collaborate together, more people will be free from corporate jobs or like the mundane tasks that they are really not interested in, and giving us more time freedom and human autonomy. Yeah. So I think the introduction or adoption of any kind of technology needs to be taken from a more like ecosystem perspective, looking beyond what the technology is able to do. So it's not just the capabilities of the technology that would bring about the changes to our lives, but also how do we deploy it in such a way, or like the interface in which people would interact with this robot, that has to be taken into account when we adopt new technologies to leverage on for work. Yeah. So the virtual robotics playground model that we are experimenting with in Audacity, we want to really look at how people can continue to be engaged through gamification while the robot does the physical work on site. So it's a scenario where there's like the robot does not displace humans from work, but it helps humans do the difficult, dangerous, and dirty tasks that people do not want to do. And everyone has the autonomy through the game to decide what kinds of tasks they want to engage in, and also the amount of time they want to spend at work. And in return, they could probably receive like maybe the land that they help to demine virtually, or something like that. So it's a new definition of work.
I think this kind of open source model will be really interesting to look at. So Audacity aside, just a personal question. What is one robot that you're absolutely looking forward to build in the near term right now?
I don't know if it's in the near term, but I really want a robot for like the nomads in Mongolia. So I mean, Mongolia is kind of my favorite country. So I think, and it's also a community, like the Mongolian community is nomadic. It's one of like the last few nomadic cultures left behind. And also, so a robot that could facilitate their daily routine of caring for the animals, like whether it's milking the animals or like herding the animals. I think it would be really nice to see technology becoming accessible to these scattered and decentralized communities where there is no centralized body to help with overcoming some of the current barriers of entry of adopting technology. So it'll be nice. I think it'll be very interesting when there's an alternative model that will allow like some form of maybe sharing the hardware or the technology across like all these individual communities that are not like together.
Great. Thanks a lot, Shen, for joining.
Thank you.
Okay. Finally, as we see at the top of the pyramid of Maslow's hierarchy, I think self-esteem and self-actualization are actually the highest levels to attain, right? So in relation to Permacolony, what this means is that while we are looking at achieving 100% self-sustainability, that is not our only goal, right? In fact, I think flourishing is important as well. It's important for members in a community to find happiness and life satisfaction, and that's where well-being really comes into the picture, right? So let's welcome Jen on board. So Jen.
Hi.
Hi, Jen. Yes. So I know you're co-leading Project Flourish at Audacity, which looks at how we are able to enable physical and mental well-being at scale. So tell us a little bit more about this vision. How should we break down the word or the concept of flourishing, which seems to be a very broad term?
Yeah, okay, thank you. So here at Audacity, Project Flourish explores the future of well-being, where humans are empowered by technology instead of feeling empowered by it. So the term flourish, by plain definition, is the ability to thrive and grow in a healthy or vigorous way, especially as the result of a compatible environment. So the visions which you have just heard, the 5 visions that you've just heard my friends say, share pretty much sums up the best possible state of flourishing and well-being we could actually be in. And we as human beings are all like all living things. We do not live in or exist in silos. We're a part of a complex ecosystem that's driven by irrational states. And our interactions impact the world around us more intentionally than we think, and vice versa. We are also affected by the actors in the environment we live in. So just from the very moment you wake, the interaction with your family, your co-worker, a passing stranger, or even the choice of purchase or your transportation mode, where you spend your time and energy will have its second or third order effects. Academically speaking, flourishing is defined by a few schools that have been studying this subject. And for Harvard, it's the degree of life satisfaction in family, work, education, community. Whereas from UPenn, Martin Seligman, it's the flourishing in degree of authentic happiness, where he considers positivity, engagement, meaning, or accomplishment. And Anil Chima at Stanford considers emotional psychological, social, and contemplative well-being, as well as physical factors for determining flourishing. At Audacity, however, our intention is not to promote like a particular framework of what flourishing is, because it's quite unfair to actually settle on a universal well-being standard that's for all, not to mention challenging. So because, life satisfaction is subjective to an individual's ever-changing state, culture, and context and environment. These fancy and frameworks aside, like the easiest way I think, or we think, to understand the concept of flourishing is actually looking within yourself and what is your gut feel, what do you value as a human being, and what drives you. So, some examples that my friends have shared, right? It could be pursuing authentic happiness, could be, participating in activities that grant a larger impact on human capital, such as, giving back to society, or maybe giving back to environment, or maybe it's working on renewable energy, right? That, benefits, a greater system. It could also be maybe providing opportunities for nurturing physical and mental health, technologies that provide opportunities for upskilling so that mundane tasks are taken away from us and we do the things that we love. Yeah, and I guess the last point of understanding the concept of flourishing is knowing that well-being is like an elusive whale. We know it's there and it's important for us, but for whatever reason, we always find excuses to put our well-being at the last. And I think with opportunities that tools and technologies such as transformative technologies can bring us, we'll be able to kind of figure out what's an appropriate value-based metric system that is flexible and personalized, while at the same time helping us to achieve a state of well-being.
Right. Jen, I like how you mentioned about happiness, satisfaction, and purpose, right? Because I think these are concepts that we all as individuals can easily relate to. And just now, I mean, you did mention a little bit about this group of technologies called transformative technologies. And I understand that it's kind of like a growing scene in the US and many parts of the world as well. So what are some examples of this kind of transformative technologies that can help us to lead better lives?
Yeah, so it's quite interesting because when we started talking about trans tech, everyone didn't know what it was. They thought it was like maybe trans music or digital transformation or something like that. So transformative technologies, or trans tech for short, there are many criteria that considers what trans tech is. So in short, they are medically and scientifically validated tools that support mental health and well-being and joy. It can be used to reduce stress, reduce anxiety, maybe help someone develop a strong sense of wellness, awareness, resilience. It is also used to help expand mental and emotional intelligence, and perhaps maybe also an assistive platform to experience transformation and deep connection. Another criteria for trans tech could also probably include exponential technologies such as AR, VR, sensors, robotics, AI, machine learning, neurofeedback, and biofeedback. But most importantly, trans tech exists with ExpoTech because it democratizes the data that used to be only available to hospitals, doctors, and researchers. Now with personal devices, you can actually take a look at what inside of your body looks like on your own mobile phone through apps and whatnot. Yeah, so trans tech kind of helps us understand the complexities of our mind and biosignals, which then gives us a better insight of who we are and how we are as a person, so that we can enhance the way we live as well as connect with others.
That's great. Thanks so much for sharing, Jen. I think there are a lot of interesting developments in this space, and I think even while countries such as Singapore is a little bit early at this point in time, I think with the increased kind of emphasis on well-being and wellness and how we need such solutions, right? Especially in times of crisis like this, it will be very, very relevant for us. So I'm very glad that Audacity as a whole, we are looking towards that as well. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Jen. Yeah. No worries. So thanks a lot to all community project leads joining me for this session. Yeah. So I think to sum this entire session up, I think it's really the point is anyone with similar visions as us, if we have seen through all the different 6 visions across the different teams, we are definitely open to working with you guys. So for startups here, if you know other innovators or other startups that are doing similar things, we'll be happy to talk to other places as well, right? Because we're trying to build this whole community of 100 or more innovators who work with us on Permacolony.